Stop button.
Hi, everybody. 9. Meaningless bumps. Slow down. You're going too fast, Miss Karen warned. You can't possibly decipher what you're feeling. Natalie reined in her galloping fingertips and moved them more gently, with exaggerated slowness across the meaningless bumps on paper. But even with intensive one-on-one attention from Miss Karen, learning Braille seemed hopeless. Why even try? It certainly didn't help that Natalie was distracted by the recent cell phone call from Meredith. Natty, here's the plan. We're all going to the country fair. You, me, Coralie, and Suzanne. Friday night. So call me as soon as you get off the bus Friday, okay? Okay? Natalie didn't answer right away, because as much as she wanted to be with Meredith and her friends, doing stuff at night was scary now. The glaucoma that had robbed Natalie of her peripheral vision bit by bit over the years had also destroyed the millions of tiny rods in her eyes. With those rods, those tiny photoreceptors, went the ability to see at night. She had confided this in Meredith recently, although she hadn't exactly told her how frightened she was going out at night. No one knew. But couldn't Meredith imagine? Didn't she care? Natalie. I'm not sure, Meredith. But you have to. I can't eat all that funnel cake by myself. And you love the Ferris wheel. Besides, we're meeting people there. Natalie. People? Who? Meredith, giggling. You'll see. Natalie, serious and very annoyed because Meredith wasn't remembering. But I won't see. Meredith, sighing. Sorry, Nat. You know what I meant. You know I didn't mean that. Natalie. Yeah, then why did you say it? Pause. Meredith. Look, I have to go now. And so Natalie had ruined the phone conversation. She was driving away her own best friend. She slumped and pulled her hands into her lap, so lost in thought she had forgotten she was sitting directly across from her Braille instructor. Miss Karen sensed Natalie's frustration and must have figured it was the Braille. Why don't we take a short break? As though on cue, Herky, Miss Karen's guide dog, noisily rearranged himself beneath the instructor's desk and stretched out his long legs. His metal dog tags jangled against the wood floor. You're fighting this, Natalie. Why? Miss Karen asked. Natalie felt her teeth clench. How could Miss Karen possibly understand how humiliating it was for Natalie to have to learn Braille? Like the cane, it wasn't even the difficulty of learning it it wasn't even the difficulty of learning it so much as what it represented. Miss Karen waited for a reply. I guess I don't understand why blind people have to learn Braille at all, Natalie said, sidestepping the issue. I mean, there are books on tape and CDs, scanners that read print, and computer programs that talk. In English, a couple kids use a special laptop. Miss Karen smiled. Yes? They're Braille notebooks, she said. Indeed, Natalie, there is so much new technology out there, but not everything is available in an audible version. And say you needed to label something, a box of cereal, for example, because how are you going to tell all those cereal boxes in the cupboard apart? Or the directions for a cake mix, or a tag in your shirt telling you what color it is, or whether it's striped or solid. How will you know those things if you can't read and write Braille? None of that had occurred to Natalie. What if your technology breaks down or loses its battery charge? How are you going to take notes that you can read back? I don't know, Natalie answered. If you lose your sight and you can't read Braille, Natalie, you will be considered illiterate. Here we go again, Natalie thought, jumping to the worst possible conclusion. She plucked a water bottle from her backpack on the floor beside her. There was an uncomfortable pause. Natalie took a sip of water and looked away. Is it because learning Braille would be admitting that you have a serious vision problem? Miss Karen asked. Natalie's eyes widened, and she swung her head around. Miss Karen, you don't understand how hard it is. You don't understand how hard this has been. You don't understand how hard this has been. But that's where you're wrong, Natalie. Because I do understand. I lost my sight when I was 15. I lost my sight when I was 15 years old. Like you, I had to make the transition from reading print to recognizing Braille code. It was difficult, losing my sight, learning Braille, learning to use a cane. I won't kid you. Many times I wanted to give up. Miss Karen was 15 years old when she lost her sight. When she lost sight? A swarm of questions raced through Natalie's mind. How did it happen? What was it like? Was she devastated? Everything may seem overwhelming right now. Miss Karen went on. You just have to take things one step at a time. At least with the Braille, there is a system that you can learn. Natalie. Miss Karen seemed so together, so upbeat. How did she ever get to that point? There was another long pause. Miss Karen cleared her throat. So, are you envisioning the Braille cell? The Braille cell? She was going to continue the lesson. The raised dots numbered 1 through 6? Yes, Natalie replied. She should at least try. 1 through 6. The first 10 letters of the alphabet use only the top 4 of the 6 dots in the cell, Miss Karen noted. The next 10 letters, K through T, are identical to A through J, except that they have an additional dot in position 3. So basically, if you add a dot 3 to A through J, you will get K through T. Excuse me. That night, while some of the kids went to the gym to play bingo with Braille cards, Natalie stayed behind in her room. Her roommate was sitting in the hall with her cell phone, talking to her boyfriend, so Natalie figured it was a good time to practice. The sooner she learned everything, she figured, the sooner she could return home for good. So she picked up the heavy gray brailer that she'd been tripping over the last few days and set it on her desk. There was a short stack of heavy braille paper in the desk drawer. She rolled the piece into the brailer. The brailer worked like a typewriter, except that it had 6 tabs, one for each dot of the braille cell instead of the letters. The tabs needed to create each letter had to be pressed simultaneously. After creating a letter, Natalie felt with her fingertips what had been punched out in the paper. She had to put some muscle in. She had to put some muscle in to make each braille letter. It wasn't nearly as easy as using the sensitive computer keyboard. She did 10 letters, messed up on 5 of them, and arms resting on the desk, leaned her head on one hand. Her heart just wasn't in it. The brailer was difficult to use, and Natalie's right wrist hurt after the cane lesson that afternoon with Miss Audra. Reach out and take hold of the cane as though shaking hands, Natalie. The movement should come from the wrist. Your hand may hurt. It takes a lot of practice, but practice. But Natalie didn't want to shake hands with her cane. She didn't want to learn how to hold it or how to sweep the area in front of her. She wanted to break the darn thing over her knee. Natalie moved the brailer to one side of her desk. Her mind drifted. Learning braille would be admitting that you have a serious vision problem. Meredith's chirpy voice echoed. You'll see. You'll see. Natalie's cranky reply haunted. But I won't see. Natalie squeezed her eyes shut with deep regret. A, 1 dot. B, 2 dots. 2 down. C, 2 across. Those cells. Darn them. Those braille cells, darn them. They had stacked out a spot in her brain and were doing calisthenics. Natalie couldn't get them out of her head now. Thank goodness there were only 2 more days until she could get on a bus and go home for the weekend. She wanted to sleep in her own bed, cook with her mother, get her hands on the goats, and tell Meredith so many things. How sorry she was about the phone call. How Eve had no concept of color and memorized her clothes by the way they felt. How much she hated the cane. And maybe she would confide in Meredith about how much she had changed in the past 3 weeks ever since the last visit with Dr. Rose. No one else knew how scared she was either, underneath. Would Meredith be able to help her? Would she even want to help her? Or would confiding her fear simply scare away her friends. They could be fluky, especially Coralie and Suzanne. Probably best to let any of them, probably best not to let any of them in on it, she concluded. They wouldn't be able to deal with it. God knows, those weren't the big questions. Those weren't the biggest questions either, because deep down in her core, Natalie wondered if she would be able to deal with it too.